Hey guys, so I want to talk to you about why we're doing plan number 4 over here. So this lesson has to do with something called the Fermi paradox. And the reason we're doing this lesson relates back to our very first lesson on wicked problems, and it's going to integrate itself into everything else we've done this year. Before we get started, what is a paradox? So a paradox is something that has sound reasoning and a sound premise. However, it's going to lead to something that makes absolutely no sense, or it's impossible. By the way, a premise is the base of the argument, and the conclusion is the result of the premise. Let's take a look at an example.
Let's imagine you won a beautiful boat as a prize in a contest. You love your new boat and decide to take it out for a ride. Everything is going well, the sun shines bright, and it's a beautiful day, when suddenly a storm comes. You lose control of your boat, and it hits some rocks on the shore. Fine, you say, I'll just repair my boat. So you decide to change the wooden hull for a new, tougher metal. In the following weeks, the engine stops working, and to make it worse, a pelican decides to use its sails as a nest, and ends up ripping them in the process. I'll get a new engine, you say, more powerful and sturdier, and new sails for my little boat. Eventually, you start thinking, all the parts that once made up your little boat were changed. That boat you have now, is it really your original little boat? This is the ship of Theseus paradox. We know what a ship is, and we heard the stories of Theseus. But that raises the question, what is a paradox? To understand what a paradox is, we must first understand the types of paradoxes. The Monty whole problem is a brain teaser in the form of a probability puzzle, loosely based on an American television game show. Suppose you are in this program and have the option to choose between 3 doors. Behind one door lies 1 million in cash. Behind the other 2, cute little piggies. You pick a door, let's say, number 2, and the host, in order to create suspense, opens door number 3 and reveals a cute piggy. He then gives you the option to change doors. Would you change your choice? At first, you might think, it makes no difference. It's a 50% chance to choose the right one anyway, I'll just keep mine. Well, not really. In this case, if you kept your choice, you would have a 1 in 3 chance to win the main prize. But if you changed your choice, your chances would actually double. This is a veritable paradox, one that initially seems absurd, but is proven true in a logical way. Let's say you chose one of the wrong doors. The presenter will always show you the other wrong door. After all, he won't show the door with the money, as he wants to keep the audience suspense. If you decide to stick with your first choice, you keep your chances of 33%. But if you listen to your friendly disembodied narrator and decide to switch, you will enter the 66% zone. As you already know what is behind one of the other doors, you have just effectively doubled your chances of winning. And do not worry, we'll adopt the little piggies later. The paradoxes of ZENO are a set of philosophical problems initially thought by the Greek philosopher ZENO of ELEA. In one of them, he states that for the phenomenon of motion to occur, an object must change its position. Makes sense, does it not? He gives an example of an arrow during flight. He states that at any moment, the arrow is not moving to where it is, or to where it is not. Why? Well, it's very simple. He can't go to where he is not, because no time passes, in an instant, for it to move there. It can't move to where it is, because it's already there. In other words, at every instant of time there is no movement occurring. If everything is stopped at every instant, and time is composed entirely of instants, then motion is impossible. Sounds like an absurd statement, doesn't it? Of course it does. It is in fact false. This is the arrow paradox, an example of a falsidical paradox. One that establishes a result that not only seems false, but is in fact false, due to a fallacy in its demonstration. Oh, and don't forget, we are always in movement, on Earth, through space. And finally, we return to the ship of Theseus paradox, classified as an antinomy, one that achieves a contradictory result, even by correctly applying our accepted forms of logical reasoning. It is in this category that we find the most famous paradoxes we know, like the grandfather paradox. If you went back in time and killed your grandfather, your father could never have been born. Thus, you too couldn't have come to this world. But wait, if you weren't born, you couldn't have gone back in time to kill your grandfather. Paradox. Time travel is a controversial phenomenon in the scientific community. We simply don't have a complete understanding of how exactly time travel would work, so we can't really solve those puzzles at the moment. Some believe that they are indeed possible, others claim that to accept time travel in a nonlinear fashion, we would have to throw much of what we know as the laws of physics out the window. The main idea behind paradoxes is to question our way of thinking and the acceptance of what we consider as truth. They do not deal with an issue that cannot be solved, but rather a problem where we still lack information to help us better understand the answer. Perhaps in a distant future, we can solve the grandfather paradox, or say for sure if your boat remained the same after we changed its parts. It's okay not to know the answer right now. After all, the fun part is working so that someday we can figure out the solution together.
Confused yet? Great. Let's continue.